Claire buried an empty coffin at her husband's funeral. She just didn't know it yet. Pause. March 15th, 2019. That's the day Claire Morrison's world ended, or so she thought. Her husband David had gone on what he called a soul-searching hiking trip to the remote mountains of Colorado. 3 days into his solo adventure, the park rangers found his abandoned campsite. Tent still pitched, food scattered, his hiking boots placed neatly by the entrance, as if he'd simply vanished into thin air. The search lasted 2 weeks. Helicopters, rescue dogs, volunteers combing every trail for miles. Nothing. David Morrison, loving husband of 12 years, father of 2, had apparently fallen into one of the area's notorious hidden ravines. His body, the rangers explained gently, might never be recovered. Claire was 34 years old, suddenly a widow with twin 8-year-old daughters who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. Pause. The life insurance payout was $750,000. David had increased the policy just 6 months earlier, explaining he wanted to make sure his family would be taken care of if anything happened. "You never know," he'd said, kissing Claire's forehead. "I want you and the girls to be secure." How thoughtful, how caring, how perfectly calculated. For 2 years, Claire struggled to rebuild. She used the insurance money to pay off their mortgage, set up college funds for the twins, and eventually started a small bakery, something she'd always dreamed of but never had the capital to pursue. David would have been proud, she told herself. He always believed in her dreams. The bakery was called Second Chances. The irony wasn't lost on her. Pause. July 2021. Claire was at a coffee shop in Denver meeting with a potential supplier for her bakery. She was reviewing contracts when a familiar laugh made her blood freeze. She looked up. Across the busy cafe, partially hidden behind a newspaper, sat a man with a full beard and different haircut. But that laugh, she'd heard it every day for 12 years. She knew the way he drummed his fingers on the table when he was thinking, the specific way he tilted his head when he was amused. It was David, very much alive, very much not at the bottom of a Colorado ravine. Pause. Claire's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and started recording. She watched as this ghost from her past paid for his coffee with cash, chatted casually with the barista, and walked out like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't destroyed his family, like he hadn't attended his own funeral. She followed him, 3 blocks to a modest apartment building. She watched him unlock apartment 4B with keys that jingled just like the ones she'd buried with his personal effects. That night, Claire hired a private investigator. Pause. What they uncovered was a masterpiece of deception. David Morrison had died in Colorado, yes. But Daniel Matthews had been born the same day, complete with a new Social Security number, driver's license, and a job at a local construction company. The PI found bank records showing regular deposits, exactly the kind of amounts you'd expect from someone living off a $750,000 nest egg, carefully withdrawn in small increments to avoid suspicion. David had been planning this for over a year. The increased life insurance policy, the solo hiking trip to a remote area known for its dangerous terrain and missing persons cases. Even the scattered campsite had been staged, down to the abandoned hiking boots that were actually a size too small, boots he'd bought specifically for this purpose. He'd hiked out through an unmarked trail, had a car waiting, and simply drove away from his old life, from his wife, from his daughters who still cried for their daddy. Pause. But here's the detail that broke Claire's heart all over again. David had been living just 43 miles away. For 2 years, he'd been close enough to drive to his daughter's soccer games, close enough to see Claire struggle with single parenthood, watch her cry at the grocery store when their favorite song played over the speakers, witness her slowly rebuilding a life he'd shattered. He'd been close enough to come home. He just chose not to. Pause. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday. Claire waited outside his apartment building at 6 a.m. when she knew he left for work. When Daniel, whoever he was now, stepped outside, she was standing by his truck. "Hello, honey," she said. "How was your hike?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, just a moment, she saw the man she'd married, the fear, the guilt, the recognition that his carefully constructed new life was crumbling. Then he ran. Pause. Actually ran. Down the street, leaving his truck, his keys, his new identity scattered behind him like the fake campsite 2 years earlier. Claire called the police from his driver's seat. The arrest made national news. David Morrison, back from the dead, charged with insurance fraud, identity theft, and abandonment. The man who'd supposedly died saving money for his family's future had stolen that very future for himself. During the trial, prosecutors revealed the full scope of his planning. David had researched missing persons cases for months, studying which scenarios were most likely to result in presumed death without a body. He'd practiced the hike multiple times, timing his escape route. He'd even researched Claire's emotional patterns, predicting how long she'd grieve before moving forward with the insurance claim. He'd studied his own wife like a mark in a con game. Pause. The defense argued that David had suffered a mental breakdown, that the pressure of providing for his family had driven him to desperate measures. They painted him as a victim of his own anxiety and depression. Claire testified for 3 hours. She told the court about explaining death to 8-year-olds, about selling her wedding ring to cover therapy bills, about the night she found their youngest daughter talking to David's photo, asking why Daddy didn't love them enough to stay safe. He didn't just fake his death, Claire told the jury. He killed the father my children believed in. He murdered the husband I trusted, and he buried our family's ability to ever feel secure again. Pause. David was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The insurance company recovered most of the money, though legal fees and David's 2 years of spending had reduced the amount significantly. But here's what Claire learned that no court could address. The David she'd married, the man she'd grieved, had never really existed. The person capable of this level of deception, this calculated cruelty toward his own children, that person had been there all along, hiding behind 12 years of good morning kisses and bedtime stories. She'd been married to a stranger. She'd mourned a ghost, and she'd raised her daughters to miss a man who'd never deserved their love. Pause. Today, Claire's bakery is thriving. Her daughters, now 12, are in therapy but slowly healing. They've learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Claire never remarried. She says she's not sure she could ever trust someone enough to share a life again. How do you open your heart when you've learned that the person sleeping next to you for over a decade was capable of erasing you without a second thought? David sends letters from prison. Claire burns them without reading. Pause. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't what someone does to you. It's discovering who they were capable of being all along. How do you grieve someone who never really died? Because they were never really alive to begin with.